You're about to hear a dangerous story. Not dangerous because it talks about wars, political conspiracies, or state secrets, but because after listening to it all the way through, you may never look at your own choices the same way again. Because if this works, by the end of this video, you'll catch yourself staring at a simple bag of chips, a political Instagram post, or the friendly smile of a TV host and thinking, do I really want this? Or did someone plant this desire in my head? This story begins with a man who made women smoke in public as an act of freedom. And it ends with you realizing that a big part of what you believe is free will was written for you decades before you were born. That man's name is Edward Bernays, but you can call him the father of manipulation. And if you have the nerve, stay until the end. Because this is not just about history. It's about the invisible engineering that still, today, decides what you buy, who you vote for, and even what you think is right or wrong. It's 1929, New York City, Easter parade on Fifth Avenue. The streets are packed. Photographers, journalists, the American elite showing off hats, dresses, cars. In the middle of the crowd, a group of young, elegant women, carefully selected, quietly take position at a strategic point along the parade. They receive a simple, almost trivial instruction. When I give the signal, light up. The signal comes. They reach into their handbags, pull out thin, cylindrical objects, put them between their lips, strike a match, and light up. Cigarettes. Women smoking in public, in the heart of New York, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. To us today, nothing special. Back then, it was scandalous, socially unacceptable. Women who smoked publicly were seen as vulgar, improper. Cigarettes, up to that point, were a symbol of masculinity. But on that specific morning, something shifts. Photographers rush over. Journalists get closer. Why are you doing this? They ask. And the answer is devastatingly simple, brilliantly calculated. We're lighting our torches of freedom. Torches of freedom. The next day, the major American newspapers print the photos. Beautiful, well-dressed, confident women with lit cigarettes between their fingers, defying conservative morals. Not as addicts, not as shameless, but as heroines of a new era. From that moment on, millions of women began copying that gesture. Smoking stopped being a feminine taboo and became an act of emancipation. They were sold cigarettes. What they received was freedom. You can guess, none of this was spontaneous. The women were paid. The line they gave to the journalists was rehearsed. The photographers had been tipped off beforehand. The phrase, torches of freedom, was carefully chosen. Nothing there was random. Everything was engineered. The engineering of consent. The mind behind that scene belonged to Edward Bernays, nephew of Sigmund Freud. The man who took his uncle's ideas about unconscious desires, fears, traumas, repressed impulses, and decided to apply them not in private offices, but on a mass scale. Not to heal people, but to control them. Let's run a quick mental experiment. Think about the last time you bought something on impulse, changed your mind after watching a very convincing video, felt instant hatred for a politician you barely knew, or felt proud to share a cause, a slogan, a flag. Now answer silently. Did you really decide that on your own? Or did someone, somewhere, carefully plan each stimulus you received so that, in the end, you would believe the decision was yours? That's what's at stake here. Over the next hour, you'll see how Bernays took the rising feminist movement and used it as a weapon to sell cigarettes, how he helped topple governments, sell wars, and shape the very idea of modern democracy, and how media, advertising, and politics entered a silent marriage to turn you into a puppet that swears it cuts its own strings. And more importantly, you'll discover signs that show when your mind is being led instead of leading. But before going further, a discomforting warning. At several moments, you may find yourself thinking, "That wouldn't work on me. I'm not that easily manipulated." That thought by itself is part of the problem, because every effective manipulation starts with the need to believe that it doesn't happen to me. So who exactly was Edward Bernays? Born in 1891 in Vienna and raised in the United States, Bernays had a rare privilege: early access to the theories of his famous uncle, Sigmund Freud. While the world still looked suspiciously at those ideas about repressed desires, sexuality, and the unconscious, Bernays saw a treasure. If people are not governed by reason, if what truly moves them are fears, hidden desires, insecurities, then whoever masters those triggers masters society. Bernays didn't want to be just another advertising man. He gave himself a much more ambitious title: Engineer of Consent. Think carefully about those two words. Engineering, something technical, systematic, planned. Consent, not imposition, not an order. It's when you accept, agree, feel like deciding. The dark genius of Bernays was realizing that the most efficient way to control someone is not through force, but by making that person want exactly what you need them to want. Don't command. Don't forbid. Don't say, "You'll do this because I said so." Plant emotions, stir up insecurities, offer symbols, and let the person arrive at the right conclusion on their own. On their own, in quotation marks. Now go back to the scene of the proud smoking women. At that moment, the tobacco industry had a multi-billion-dollar problem. Half the population, women, hardly smoked in public. It was socially shameful. Prejudice, morals, tradition, call it what you like. Banning wasn't the issue. Trying to persuade with logic, "It tastes good, it relaxes you," wasn't enough. Bernays noticed something else. The feminist movement was gaining strength. Women wanted to vote, work, take up space, break rules. There was a repressed desire to break free from old shackles. What did he do? He tied a product to a deep desire. The cigarette would no longer be just a nicotine cylinder. It would become a symbol, a torch of freedom. Women weren't just lighting tobacco. They were lighting their own emancipation. If this feels obvious now, remember, at the time when it was new, Bernays was literally inventing the manual for using noble causes as tools for selling. And here comes the first uncomfortable hook. If almost 100 years ago, someone could take a legitimate cause, women's freedom, and use it to sell a product that kills, what's stopping brands from doing the same today with other causes you believe in? How many empowered, progressive, inclusive, conscious campaigns have you seen that seemed more focused on selling than on changing anything? Are you always sure you notice when that happens? Bernays didn't just advertise products. He helped shape the very way America sees itself. During World War I, he worked on propaganda campaigns for the US government. The goal was simple and brutal: convince a hesitant population that entering the war was not only necessary, but morally right. The propaganda didn't say, "We're going to kill people on the other side of the world for geopolitical interests." It said, "We're going to defend democracy." It said, "We're going to protect civilization." It said, "If you're patriotic, you support the war." Again, the same pattern. You don't sell an action, you sell a meaning. And after the war, Bernays asked a chilling question. If it's possible to mobilize an entire nation to kill and die through propaganda, why not use the same techniques to govern in peacetime? That's where the modern logic of public relations is born. The word propaganda smelled too openly manipulative. Public relations sounded softer, more acceptable. But the goal was the same: shape public opinion. In 1928, Bernays wrote a book that should be mandatory reading in schools but is usually ignored: Propaganda. There, he states without hesitation something many still refuse to admit. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. Let that sink in. An invisible government. People who weren't elected, whom you may never know, but who decide which topics appear in the news, which narratives dominate social media, which fears are amplified, which desires are created. And the most ironic part, all inside a system that prides itself on offering freedom of choice. Here, the thesis of this video becomes clearer. You don't really choose what you buy or who you vote for. At best, you choose between options carefully placed in front of you. You don't freely decide what you wish for. You wish for whatever the invisible government made desirable. Maybe you're thinking, okay, that's interesting, but still too abstract. Let's go one level deeper. Imagine you're at home scrolling your feed. You watch a moving video about an important social cause. The brand behind the video appears discreetly at the end, with a beautiful message of support. You feel touched, maybe share it, maybe identify with it. You think, this company is on the right side of history. Days later, you're at the store. You're standing in front of a shelf with several versions of the same product. Without thinking too much, you pick that brand. You don't compare labels thoroughly. You don't build a cost-benefit spreadsheet. You simply feel you like that brand more. It feels almost instinctive. What just happened? You didn't buy a product. You bought a story. You bought a symbol. You bought the feeling of being aligned with a value you care about. It's the exact same logic of the torches of freedom. What Bernays did in 1929 with cigarettes, today is done with clothes, banks, apps, politicians, influencers. The formula works so well it became standard. Identify a collective desire or fear, tie your product or message to that desire or fear, repeat the association until it feels natural, and let people believe they arrived at the conclusion themselves. The BBC documentary, The Century of the Self, shows almost surgically how Bernays' ideas shaped the 20th century and beyond. One of the most disturbing parts is realizing how crowd psychology is used not just to sell soap, but to structure power itself. Bernays worked, for example, on campaigns for major corporations that wanted to overthrow inconvenient governments in Latin America. Instead of publicly stating, "We want to protect our economic interests," the strategy was different. Create fear, plant headlines, scare the public with the specter of communist threats, loss of freedom, chaos. Turn an elected government into a villain in the eyes of the population, so that when the coup came, it felt inevitable, even desirable. The same pattern as always. Don't impose. Make people ask for it. Here comes another key hook. When you feel political fear, fear of becoming like country X, fear of dictatorship, fear of losing rights, How often does that fear come from your own deep analysis? And how often does it come from headlines, clipped videos, heated posts, statistics ripped out of context? Are you sure your fears are truly yours? But maybe the most brilliant and most dangerous aspect of Bernays' vision is this. He didn't see the masses as capable of making good decisions on their own. To him, most people were driven by irrational, selfish, dangerous impulses. Without an elite to manipulate and steer those impulses, society would fall into chaos. It's almost an aristocratic view. Superior minds shape the perceptions of ignorant masses in the name of stability. He didn't see himself as a villain. He saw himself as someone helping maintain order. That's one of the most dangerous justifications in history. I manipulate you for your own good. Today, when tech platforms, governments, or media outlets say they filter content to protect you, moderate debate to prevent hate, organize information to make your life easier, where does care end, and where does perception engineering begin? Who decides what you should and shouldn't see? Who defines which topics will trend and which will be buried? Who chooses which scandals deserve your outrage and which should quietly disappear? And most of all, why do you trust those choices so much? Maybe you're still thinking, okay, but I'm rational. I check things. I don't fall for this easily. Then let's look at a psychological trick Bernays and every great manipulator understands well: the human need for consistency. You like to believe your opinions are coherent, that your choices make sense. Your brain hates dissonance, that uncomfortable feeling that something doesn't add up. So after you make a decision, buy a product, support a politician, back a cause, an invisible mechanism kicks in. You start searching for reasons to prove you were right. Even if, deep down, the initial decision was driven by an irrational, emotional, manipulative stimulus, you dress that decision up with logical arguments. Example: someone is bombarded for weeks with content linking a particular car model to success and status. One day, they stretch their budget and buy that car. If you ask why, they won't say, "Because the ads preyed on my insecurities and convinced me I'd only be respected with this car." They'll say things like, "It's safer. It has a better engine. It's a great value. I earned it." The rationalization comes later. The desire came first, and here's the twist. If even intelligent, educated, critical people fall into this mechanism, imagine everyone else. The real question isn't, am I manipulated, but in which areas of my life am I being manipulated without noticing? Let's return to the torches of freedom. By turning cigarettes into a symbol of women's emancipation, Bernays applied a brutal psychological law. We'll call here the law of belief. Play with the human need to believe. People need to believe in something bigger than themselves. Freedom, justice, progress, faith, identity, belonging. That need is so strong it creates openings. Whoever manages to tie their message to those big values gains direct access to your mind. When that woman in 1929 lit her cigarette, she wasn't thinking, "I'm inhaling toxic smoke and feeding a highly profitable corporate addiction." She was thinking, "I'm challenging patriarchy. I'm showing I can do everything a man can. I'm taking control of my life." She needed to believe that. Without that meaning, the act would be purely self-destructive. The same logic plays out today when someone consumes something harmful, overpriced, or alienating, but wraps it in a cloak of symbolic value. I deserve this luxury. I'm doing this for my family. I buy this brand because it represents who I am. I vote for this candidate because he stands for my people. Belief is the invisible packaging of manipulation. That's why the original thesis comes back even stronger. You don't simply choose based on facts. You choose based on narratives someone built for you to believe. At this point, you might feel a bit uneasy. It's as if threads are starting to appear at the edges of your awareness. That feeling is good. It means the red pill is starting to dissolve. But there's still a crucial step. Realizing that this engineering doesn't come from a single evil mastermind in a dark room. It's a system. Bernays laid the groundwork. Others refined it. Today, marketers, political strategists, showrunners, app designers, data scientists, all drink from this source, directly or indirectly. The difference is that in Bernays' time, control worked mainly through newspapers, radio, posters. Today it flows through algorithms. Back then, a handful of editors decided what the public would see. Now, a blend of commercial interests, AI models, and engagement metrics decides what shows up on your screen. But the heart of it is still the same. It's not just about showing things. It's about shaping desire. The feed you scroll isn't neutral. It's a distorted mirror of who you already are, combined with who someone wants you to become. If you tend to get outraged at a certain topic, the system feeds you more of it. If you tend to click on certain bodies, lifestyles, products, the system amplifies those. The declared goal is to keep you engaged. The side effect, or maybe parallel goal, is to keep you predictable. And the more predictable you are, the easier it is to steer your decisions. Now pause and look back. How many of your big opinions about politics, health, behavior, consumption came from truly deep investigation, wide reading, conversations with people who disagree with you? And how many came from podcast clips, viral threads, emotional videos, punchy one-liners, posts repeated until they became obvious truth? This isn't about blaming you. It's about revealing the environment where you were trained to think. Because here's another central point of control psychology. The most effective manipulation doesn't force you to agree with one specific thing. It defines the playing field, where any disagreement you have is still useful to the game. Example: a hyper-polarized debate where you can choose either side A or side B. You rage against one side, defend the other passionately, argue, share, cancel. But underneath, both sides reinforce the same power structures, the same consumption logic, the same flow of money. You choose the team. They control the league. Maybe you're asking yourself, all right, but is there any way out? Or are we doomed to be puppets forever? The honest answer is uncomfortable. There's no complete escape, but there is awareness, and that changes everything. Absolute free will is a fantasy. Our choices are always shaped by genetics, context, culture, language, limitations. What Bernays did was expose and exploit another layer of this lack of freedom: planned manipulation. But seeing manipulation doesn't mean becoming a cynical robot who believes nothing. It means questioning the impulse before the action, noticing when a product comes wrapped in a cause, recognizing when a strong emotion, fear, anger, pride, suddenly flares right after you consume some extremely well-crafted content, and spotting symbols being used as bait. A practical way to start is to ask inconvenient questions at the moment of decision. Why do I want this so badly right now? Who benefits if I believe this? Did this feeling come from direct experience or from repeated narratives? If I had grown up in a different country, a different bubble, would I still think the same? Those questions won't completely cut the strings, but they make them more visible, and the more visible the strings, the weaker the control. Before wrapping up, go back once more to the central image of this video. Human marionettes, strings coming out of their heads, tied to invisible hands. It's tempting to imagine those hands belong to them, politicians, billionaires, big corporations, the media, and to a large extent, they do. But there's another, subtler level. Many times, you're also holding some of those strings. When you repeat a narrative without checking it. When you share content just because it confirms what you already think. When you do free marketing for brands and ideas you've never actually examined. You're not only manipulated, you help perpetuate manipulation. And maybe that's the final blow to the myth of free will. It's not just that we don't choose freely, it's that often, without realizing it, we help imprison other people's freedom. Understanding Bernays means understanding not only how they fool us, but also how we take part in the game. So what's left? The story of the man who taught women to smoke as an act of liberation is not just a historical curiosity. It's a symbol of something bigger. The power to turn any object, idea, or person into an emotional symbol for steering crowds. Today, the torches of freedom have changed shape. They can be a smartphone, a flag, a lifestyle, a fiery speech, a social media filter. But the mechanics are the same. You're still lighting things up, believing you're freeing yourself when, many times, you're just tightening more sophisticated chains. This isn't about abandoning causes, quitting consumption, or becoming a digital hermit. It's about cultivating inner vigilance. Next time you feel a strong urge, a sudden outrage, or a powerful sense of belonging when buying something or defending someone, perform a small ritual. Breathe. Observe. Ask yourself, did this desire grow inside me or was it planted? The answer won't always be clear, but every time you ask, one string gets a little looser. And in the end, maybe that's the only realistic way to talk about freedom in the age of manipulation. Not the absolute freedom of someone untouched by influence. That doesn't exist. But the freedom of someone who knows they're in a theater and still chooses, consciously, which roles to accept. Edward Bernays helped build the stage. The lights are still on. The tricks are still in use. The difference is that now, you know part of the script. What you'll do with that isn't a completely free choice, but it's definitely freer than it would be if you hadn't made it this far.